wait to kick off the round of 12 in the Las Vegas Motor Speedway with Vegas native Kurt Busch taking home his first victory at the racetrack and his first win of 2020. Welcome to the MDK Racing Victory Stop episode of Las Vegas. My name is Jeff Krause and I'm going to get you filled in with everything you need to know and recap the 2020 South Point 400. And let's just say this, I'm just going to say this. This race was supposed to be the predictable race of the 3 rounds in the round of 12. We have next week Talladega, and we end off the round of 12 at Charlotte in the Roval. This race was supposed to be the predictable race, the race where we go, okay, it happened, nothing really much is going to take place, we can just move on to the next race. But no, this race just blew everything off the rails. So usually when we do these episodes, we begin right from the beginning with stage 1, stage 2, but this time we're just going to start off really where everything takes place and we start to see the main stars of this event come into play, which was around 72 laps to go. So with 72 laps to go, this is on a restart. Denny Hamlin and Mark Truex Jr. were out in front. This entire race, the main drivers were Hamlin and Elliot. Those two were the drivers to watch out for. Those two led the most laps of that entire race. So those are the 2 drivers a lot of people had eyes on possibly, or at least most likely, taking home the win tonight. But then you had Matt DiBenedetto on the restart, made an incredible 4-wide pass on Bowman, Elliot, and Truex to then move into second place right behind Denny Hamlin, who was the race leader. Now remember I said Alex Bowman, he also moved into the picture rather very late in this race. Around stage 3, around that time was when we really started to see Alex Bowman become a possible contender for this race. He was able to get by Matt DiBenedetto for second place and was actually starting to run down Denny Hamlin. That was until 53 laps ago dwhere big playoff implications would take place for Austin Dillon. He had a tremendous round of 16. A lot of people had their eyes on Dillon as to be a possible underdog for the playoffs, but he got off on the wrong foot. Car just started spewing out of his race machine. Temp was already up to 400. He reported no power steering, and he also reported a possible broken belt, which sucked because, like I said, he had a really good top 16 or round of 16 trio of finishes, and he also had a really good car in this race. He had top 10 speed the entire race, so if nothing would have happened to him, he would have finished in the top 10. I felt like he had a really good car in this race, but unfortunately with that incident, he would drop way down below to dead last in the playoff grid after this race. Now, however, that did not bring out the caution. 32 laps to go. This is when pit stops are taking place. Jimmie Johnson cuts a right rear tire. It was reported possibly he cut the tire after contact with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Remember, there's history of those two last Saturday at Bristol, but apparently they made contact, and that's what possibly looked like to have cut Johnson's right rear tire. Debris came out of the race car, and it spewed onto the back straightaway, which because of that brought out a caution in the middle of a pit cycle. So because of that, you now had drivers like Christopher Bell, Kurt Busch, and Chris Buescher, Kurt Busch, a playoff driver, stay out on the racetrack, while you had drivers like Denny Hamlin, Alex Bowman, and Chase Elliott, who were the top 3 drivers of that stage, pit. And what's interesting about this whole thing is that while those 3 drivers had to pit, Bowman was the first car 1 lap down, so he would get the free pass and was able to get back on the lead lap, while other drivers like Hamlin, Truex, and Elliott, they had to take the wave around and start behind the lap down race cars. So now you had 4 new drivers that no one expected to even be considered for the race win start up front, and that includes Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch did not have a good race all night long. He was outside the top 10, outside the top 15 for a good majority of this race. No one had him anywhere near the top 5. And here he was with 25 laps to go as the race leader. And you had drivers like Matt DiBenedetto, John Nemechek, Chris Buescher, and Christopher Bell, Michael McDowell, all starting up front with 25 to go. But you know what they say, in almost every NASCAR Cup race, when there's late race drama near the end, cautions breed cautions. 17 laps ago, John Nemechek, don't know what happened with him, but we just saw the camera pan to him and he was already sideways in 3 and 4. He slid up the racetrack right in front of Eric Jones and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Now, although those 2 drivers didn't hit Nemechek, Jones went up to avoid Stenhouse and they both made contact to the outside wall. They both wouldn't receive major damage, but regardless, they received some form of damage. So then when that took place, you had drivers like Hamlin, Truex, Elliott, and those drivers come onto pit road for 4 fresh tires. And when everything was all settled through, Denny Hamlin, who was the first driver out on pit road, started 13th, but he had around 12 to 15 lap tires fresher than all the drivers ahead of him. So he was going to get major momentum. If no one were to halt his run towards the front, he could get to the front in about 2 or 3 laps. Or, okay, let's be fair, maybe 4 or 5 laps. I'm just giving you a rough estimate because We know tires play a big role, especially at a track like Las Vegas that is starting to wear out. The track is 13, 14 years old. It was last repaved back in 2007, so the track has started to worn, and when the track starts to worn, tires become much more of a factor. Another thing that is typical with Las Vegas is the restarts, and late race action causes for some chaotic restarts. You saw 3 wide, 4 wide action through the entire middle portion of the field. You then had Alex Bowman, who started around near the back, around outside the top 6, get a good run on this restart, was able to just shove his way and managed to get side by side with Matt DiBenedetto for the 3rd place spot right behind leader Kurt Busch. But then again, 7 laps ago, another caution would come out, and this would involve William Byron and Christopher Bell. They would make contact on the front straightaway. William Byron spins and brings out the caution. So then we go into overtime. Denny Hamlin started 13th when that first caution came out with around 13 or so laps ago. He was now up to 6th on the outside lane, behind Alex Bowman and Kurt Busch, who was 1st on the outside lane. And Hamlin got a tremendous restart, was able to get side by side with Matt DiBenedetto in 2nd place after just 1 lap on the final lap. And it looked like if Hamlin would be able to clear DiBenedetto, it looked like he would have a shot, but DiBenedetto was able to hold Hamlin at bay, or at least stall him for side by side for a 2nd place finish. Kurt Busch will go on to win the South Point 400, win at his home racetrack for the first time in his career. Matt DiBenedetto would finish 2nd once again for the 2nd time in his career. 3rd place, Denny Hamlin. I mean, what a drive. I told you. With these tires, it doesn't take much. As long as no one halts your momentum, you can get back to the front pretty quickly. And Denny Hamlin proved just that. If he had just 1 more lap, I felt like he could have given Kurt Busch a shot for the win. He had his teammate Martin Truex Jr. in 4th place, Alex Bowman in 5th, Kyle Busch 6th, Ryan Blaney. I was surprised by how strong Ryan Blaney was in this race today. If you, especially when you take a look at how horrible they ran in the round of 16. In the round of 12, he ran pretty good tonight here at Vegas, and it makes me wonder if Blaney would have made it to the round of 12, how much of a contender could he have been? Because we look at Vegas, he has some pretty good runs here in the past. We look at Talladega, he won here back in June. We look at Charlotte, won here back in 2018. He's had good races in these next 3 races in the round of 12, and it makes me wonder how much of a contender he could have been if he was still in the playoffs. 8th and 9th is Eric Jones and Chris Buescher. Nice top 10s for those 2 drivers, and Kevin Harvick rounds out the top 10. Yeah, Jimmy Johnson in 11th, Clint Bowyer 12th, Brad Keselowski in the 13th spot. This is actually, I want to say, alright, depending on how bad Keselowski and his team was at the beginning of the race. Keselowski was reporting that the car was hitting the splitter very bad, that something about ride height or about how the car was just not at all to his liking. They were around the top 20 majority of the first 2 stages. So to see them get a top 13 finish, they salvaged a top 13 finish. It's quite an impressive recovery for the number 2 team. 14th is Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano, we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Talk about, I guess you could say, his attitude towards other drivers. Very interesting. We're going to talk about that in the show in a little bit. 15th is Ryan Newman. 16th, Cole Custer. 17th, Eric Almirola. 18th, Matt Kenseth. 19th, Ryan Preece. And John Hunter Nemechek rounds out the top 20. Other notables like Chase Elliott, 22nd now. The reason why he finished 22nd was apparently on a restart. Ryan Newman chopped him off and just killed his momentum, and he lost so much ground. He fell back to 22nd. That's from what I've been seeing on social media. There's no camera. There's no video footage of what exactly happened to Chase Elliott, but tough for him. He either led the most laps or led the 2nd most laps in this race. So he once again had another fast car at Vegas, but didn't get the finish he deserved. We look back in the 2nd race of the season in March or in February, he also had a really good car, a race contending car, and I think he ended up blowing an engine or had some issue and didn't get the finish he deserved. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 23rd, Christopher Bell 24th, William Byron 25th. Then you had Austin Dillon finish 32nd because of that broken belt issue that he suffered around 72 laps to go. And his teammate Tyler Reddick would finish in the 38th spot. Reddick just had a bunch of problems. Had too much problems in this race, and he would finish in the 38th spot, 2nd to dead last. Like I said, Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott, those two had the 2 best cars. Hamlin won stage 1 and Elliott won stage 2. Unfortunately, like I said, what happened with Elliott, he finished 22nd. Hamlin was able to rebound for a 3rd place finish after starting 13th with just under 10 laps to go. But that was really it that happened in those first two stages. But I do want to talk about Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. Now, remember last weekend at Bristol, Joey Logano held up Kyle Busch, and that allowed Harvick to close in and pass Kyle Busch for the race win. Well, Logano discussed this, and he said, basically, simply put, I have no friends on the racetrack. I'm not there to make friends. I'm there to compete. I'm there to win. Now, that's a very good mindset, and I love that mindset. But I believe he said something along the lines of, like they're basically my enemies, or something that had to do with enemies. And felt like his attitude going into the playoffs was not a good idea. Because you have to understand, Joey Logano is not popular with the garage area. He's had issues with almost every single driver in the garage area. He's had issues with Kyle Busch. He's had issues with Hamlin. He's had issues with Elliot. I mean, almost every playoff driver, I'm pretty sure, has had a problem with Logano. So it's not good when you're fighting for a championship against other competitive race cars. It's not good to basically leave a bad taste in other people's mouths. To basically race like an ass. And Logano, he raced like an ass. There was a big moment very early on in this race. I want to say not even halfway into this race. In fact, not even before stage 1 ended, Logano pulled a huge block on Chase Elliott entering turn 3. Elliott was so mad that he sort of went into that corner with a bit more throttle to push Logano harder than he wanted to. But things like that, like, it's entertaining, don't get me wrong. And I love the way how Logano drives because it gives me a reaction. I think it's very good that we have personalities like Logano in the sport because regardless if you like him or hate him, at least he gives you a reaction. I don't like Logano, but I think he's good for the sport. But when you're racing for a championship, to pull a move like that before stage 1 even ended, is not that smart. And Chase Elliott's crew chief, Alan Gustafson, said someone needs to send him, basically spin him out, but knowing it's Chase Elliott, he's not going to do that. Chase Elliott's too nice of a driver to do that, I feel like. But what goes around comes around, and this took place for the race lead. Entering turns 3 and 4, Denny Hamlin was right behind Joey Logano and Kyle Busch, who were battling for the lead. Hamlin, at the last second, goes underneath Kyle Busch, entering 3. Kyle Busch obviously was not expecting Logano. He has to check up. He slams into Logano. Logano then suffers a left rear tire rub. He has to come onto pit road not too long after. He then pits, and that is why we saw Logano basically a lap down for the entire race. I mean, for sure, Logano had a top 10. Maybe even a top 5 car. I don't think he had a race-winning car, but he definitely had a top 5 car. And he would end up finishing 14th because of that contact. He spent one lap down for about 80 to 85% of that race. So it was a great rebound for the 22 team, but again, when you're racing like this, when you're racing with the mentality of everyone's your enemy and, no one's your friend, you're not going to try and race clean with them, you kind of have to be ready for what we just saw there. When Hamlin made that move, obviously Logano, he was not expecting that, and obviously Kyle Busch, he didn't mean to hit Logano. That was just out of reaction from Hamlin, but I just found it kind of funny how basically he was treating everyone like he's not his friend. I'm going to go out there, race my race. I'm there to win. And then the same driver that he cost to win a race last weekend at Bristol ends up ruining his race in Kyle Busch. I just thought that was kind of funny, but that happens in racing for some reason. Whatever goes around comes around. Now, Kyle Busch, he finished 3rd in this race. He also had a bit of an incident around stage 2 during a pit stop cycle where he went in for a scheduled pit stop and the right front tire changer had an issue with the pit gun. He had to stay on pit road for a longer period of time. Would drop from 3rd around that area to around 9th place. Obviously, he would recover nicely, but that was about really all that happened in this race in terms of stage 1 and stage 2, which this is the reason why, in terms of my opinion for this race, I give this race about a 7.5 out of 10. The reason why I give it a 7.5 out of 10 mainly because that stage 3, in my opinion, saved this race. I know if you saw my tweet earlier, I said that this race was, like, I absolutely loved this race. That's because I was still riding off the emotions from that stage, the final stage, but now that I've calmed down, stage 1 and 2, it was good racing. It was good, don't get me wrong. High downforce, low horsepower package, it worked with this racetrack. Obviously, I think the low downforce, high horsepower would have been better. But obviously, with the tire that Goodyear brung, with the high downforce package, obviously you don't want a soft tire because that could lead to tire failures. I thought Goodyear brought a pretty good tire. We saw some tire wear in this race and made for a pretty interesting race in Stage 1 and Stage 2. Obviously, when Stage 3 came into play, all hell broke loose, and it was just chaotic, but I enjoyed this race. 7.5 out of 10. I was not expecting this race to be like this. Again, I thought this race would be predictable. Like, I thought we would expect Hamlin to be out in front, Kevin Harvick to be out in front. Like, that's what I expected. I did not expect any of what we saw in this race tonight. I did not expect Kurt Busch to be in the mix, or any of those drivers to be in the mix at all. It was a chaotic race. And also, great run for Denny Hamlin. A lot of people were talking about whether the distraction of the announcement of Michael Jordan and Hamlin going to be co-owning a race team in 2021, could that have maybe sparked distractions for the 11 team? Obviously, the round of 16, he did not have the best round of 16. In fact, he had let's just say a concerning round of 16. When you take a look at how dominant he was in the regular season with him and Kevin Harvick. A lot of people were wondering, in the round of 12, is Hamlin going to get back to form, or are we going to still see this sort of slowly downward spiral of Hamlin in the playoffs? And in this race, he showed Hamlin is still Hamlin. He's still the same. Ran really, really good. He had the best car, I felt like, that entire night, and was just one lap. I felt like just 1 or 2 laps away from potentially winning at Vegas for the first time, but it was not meant to be. That will go on to Kurt Busch. So Kurt Busch gets to go to Talladega and Charlotte Roval, 2 of the most unpredictable racetracks in the playoffs, with ease. Next race is Talladega. I am going to be excited for that one. The Super Speedway races have been very entertaining. NASCAR brought the best package. Hopefully they don't change anything about it this time around. And yeah, I cannot wait for Talladega next Sunday. But tell me what are your guys' thoughts on this race in the comment section down below. Did you like it? Did you not? And of course, until next time, my name is JettMDK from MDK. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. And I'll see you guys next time.